오늘 정세토론회는 아주 이름도 특별 정세토론회라고 붙이셨네요. 그 특별한 손님이 오셨습니다. 산딥 쿠마르 미슈라 교수님이신데요. 오늘 최은정 박사님과 같이 해서 인도와 한국 간의 그 관계, 한인도 관계를 해주실 겁니다. 먼저 시작하시기 전에 우리 최은정 박사님께서 교수님 좀 잠깐 그래도 양력과 좀 소개를 해주시는 게 어떨까요? 참고로 이렇게 계시지만 한국어가 능통하다고 하십니다. 그러니까 여러분 부담 갖지 마시고 오늘 잘 하시면 되겠습니다.
네, 안녕하십니까. 오늘 진짜 궂은 날씨에 이렇게 특별 정세 토론회에 많은 분들이 거의 다 참석해 주신 것 같아요. 참석해 주셔서 감사합니다. 그 산티 쿠마르 교수님 한국어 워낙 잘하시고 사실은 우리 연구소랑도 깊은 인연을 갖고 계시기 때문에 시작하실 때 아마 본인이 스스로 한번 소개를 해주시면 좋을 것 같고, 지금 현재 저희 연구소에서 개건연구위원 난 레지던트 펠로우로 함께 계시는 분입니다. 그 교수님 소개에 앞서 사실 이제 제가 오늘은 교수님 발표가 메인이고, 이 발표와 그다음에 이거 끝난 다음에 저희가 이제 원고도 교수님과 제가 같이 작성을 하게 됩니다만, 오늘 발표는 저희 산택 교수님 발표를 주로 하려고 합니다. 왜냐하면 그동안은 여러분께서 주로 제가 하는 인도에 대한 이야기를 주로 들으셨기 때문에 인도에 있는 권위 있는 학자로부터 인도 이야기를 들으시는 기회가 정말 소중할 것 같아서 오늘은 그렇게 자리를 기획을 하려고 합니다. 그래서 먼저 제가 이제 이 발표에 대해서만 간단히 소개를 드리고 우리 산택 교수님을 바로 모시도록 하겠는데요. 이제 이번 발표의 이 구성 이렇게 하게 된 이유는 인도와 한국이 사실은 그동안에 인도가 성장 잠재력을 가지고 있고 중요한 나라가 될 것이다 라는 이야기를 지난 수십 년간 해왔고, 저도 그 중에 한 명이었고, 그리고 한국과 인도가 엄청난 성장 잠재력을 갖고 있다 이렇게 이야기를 한 지도 굉장히 오래됐습니다. 그래서 우리가 지난 정부 때에는 신남방 정책이라는 정책을 가지고 한국과 인도가 관계 강화를 위해서 여러 방면으로 노력을 했고 일정 정도의 성과를 보였습니다. 그런데 이제는 새로운 전략적 프레임, 인도태평양 전략이라는 전략적 프레임 하에서 한국과 인도는 과연 어떤 식으로 서로를 바라보고 있고, 그런 전략적 공통점 하에서 공통점은 뭐고 또 문제점은 뭐고 앞으로 어떤 점을 개선해 나가야 될지를 좀 크리티컬하게 비판적으로 바라보고자 하는 취지에서 자리를 마련하게 됐고, 그래서 산택 교수님이 한국어를 굉장히 잘하심에도 불구하고 예리하고 조금 뉘앙스가 있는 발표를 하기 위해서 오늘 발표는 영어로 진행을 하시게 될 거고요. 질의응답은 한국어로 하게 될 겁니다. 그래서 이 정도로 제가 이제 간단하게 안내를 드리고 산택 교수님이 먼저 발표를 한 25분 정도 해주시고요. 그거에 이어서 제가 뭐 한국 측의 관점에서 보충이라든지 또 추가적인 말씀을 그 뒤에 간략해 드리도록 하겠습니다. 네, 그러면 산택 교수님 부탁드리겠습니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는 산딥 미슈라라고 합니다. 저는 인도 네루대학교에서 제가 12년 한국학을 가르쳤습니다. 그 다음에 제가 7년 네루대학교, 뉴델리에 있는 다른 대학교로 옮겨서 거기에서 제가 7년 정도 한국학을 가르치고 있습니다. 저는 세종연구소랑 아주 오래된 관계가 있습니다. 진 소장님 계실 때도 저를 여기 불러주시고 백 소장님 계실 때도, 이 소장님 계실 때도 또 제가 거의 2009년부터 세네 번 정도 제가 여기 세종 연구소 와서 연구를 해본 적이 있습니다. 그래서 제가 여기 아주 기쁘게 생각합니다. 근데 제가 지금 인도 태평양 전략과 인도 한국 관계에 대해서 말씀드리고 싶은데, 저는 한국말 좀 부족해서 사실은 영어로, 왜냐하면 정확하게 말씀드리고 싶어서 영어로 말씀드리고 그다음에 질의응답 할 때 제가 한국말로 할 겁니다. 그래서 제가 so thank you very much for inviting me. It's really my pleasure. And today we are going to talk about India-South Korea relations in Changing Indo-Pacific. All of us, we have heard about story of India-South Korea relations. In last 3 decades, from early 1990s, India-South Korea relations have improved very dramatically. in the Indo-Pacific era, in the last, say, 10 years or, say, 5 years, when there are more discussions about Indo-Pacific idea, I think both India and Korea, they have come closer to each other, and they have possibility that they can work together furthermore. Because if you look at the Indo-Pacific strategies of India and South Korea separately, you will find there are many similarities, which we are going to talk about. But I think at the same time, there may be some small gap between India and Korea, which also we need to be aware about, and we also need to come over those gaps and bridge those gaps. So this is So if you look at the general trajectory, I will give a brief introduction of our relationship. I told you that last 3 decades, 30 years, India-Korea relation improved very much. Why it happened? Because in the Cold War days, India was a closed socialist mode of economy, whereas South Korea was export-led growth model economy. It means that South Korea was looking for more market, new places where they can go and they can do their business, whereas Indian market was very closed. The second important constraint was that South Korea was security ally of the United States. India was basically a non-aligned country. So there were some fundamental structural problems, but in post-Cold War days, both the problems, they disappeared. India, in the early 1990s, we liberalized our economy, and South Korean business, especially big company, chaebols, they started going to India. So that was a very interesting beginning in the. And as all of you know, that Soviet Union collapsed, and India also started gradually going closer to United States. So these are the 2 big problems which just disappeared in post-Cold War. We can see that how our other, you can say, interests also, like pragmatism in our policy. India was looking, actually India in the early 1990s, we started something called Look-East policy, which the new version, which is now called Act-East policy. So we started, I think we had much more economic confidence from India. We wanted to learn from South Korean experiences, and we started collaborating with Korea in much more important way. If you look at the big moments in India-South Korea relations in last 30 years, I will say that 2009, I think when Lee Myung-pak was president, India and South Korea, they had FTA. FTA, they don't call it FTA, they call it CEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Next year, 2010, on the Republic Day celebration of India, January 2010, Lee Myung-pak was the chief guest. And then India and South Korea, we had this strategic partnership agreement. Furthermore, 2014, when Park Geun-hye visited India and Korea, we signed intelligence information, sharing intelligence information regarding North Korea and Pakistan, I think missile and nuclear technology transfers. In 2015, when Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi came, we signed a special strategic partnership, and 2+2 meetings started happening. So I think there have been a very important developments in our relationship. And during Moon Jae-in government, India had Act-East policy and South Korea had New Southern policy. So it was quite complementary to each other. And both of us, we are concerned about rise of China, and we want a multipolar Asia. So there are many good things which happen. And you can see some pictures when FTA was signed, then when Lee Myung-pak was our chief guest, Republic Day parade, and when President Park Geun-hye visited, when I think Narendra Modi visited Korea in 2015, and when Moon Jae-in visited India in 2018. Now, this is reflected in our bilateral trade also. In the 1990, our bilateral trade was less than 1 billion, but now it's almost 28 billion. It's not big because one way it's a big journey, but another way I think is less than satisfactory. So we'll talk about that. I think one more thing which I would like to draw your attention, that unfortunately CEPA we signed in 2009, 2010 it came into force, and 2010-11 bilateral trade improved, but then you can see that our bilateral trade has been almost stagnant. Fortunately, 2021 and especially 2022, so I think gradually again we have started rebounding. So CEPA has some problem. We'll talk about that. I think again same. I think what in security domain what we did, we had many memorandum of understandings in defense cooperation, defense research, development. 2011, India and South Korea had civil nuclear energy cooperation agreement. So all these important things have been achieved between India. And as you know that Moon Jae-in had a very special New Southern policy. And New Southern policy was targeted against India and South Korea. And India was quite, you can say, happy to have this policy and getting more attention from South Korea. Because earlier, even though like Lee Myung-pak government, they started something called New Asia Initiative. Previous governments in South Korea also had some overture to reach out Asian country, but New Southern policy was really very important juncture in that journey. So we had lots of other agreements which we had, and I think, and we are basically from 2015 onwards, we are having special strategic partnership. Now coming to, I think, like say, problem areas in our relationship, or rather, I think where we have to look into. This is a list which I prepared from Indian side. India right now, we are having strategic partnership agreement. The names are different. Sometimes it's global and strategic partnership agreement. Sometimes special strategic partnership agreement. So names are slightly different, but these are the countries with whom we are having special strategic partnership. And you can see that India is having with 30 countries. Two things which I wanted to basically draw your attention here. One, that most of strategic partnership India had, they have been pre-Narendra Modi government. 2014, Narendra Modi came to power, and basically he had very few countries with whom he had got new special strategic partnership. The second thing which I would like to draw your attention, that it doesn't mean beyond a point. Like you look at, like say, India is having strategic partnership with America, but at the same time, India is also having strategic partnership with China. India is having strategic partnership with Japan. We are also having strategic partnership with Russia. So it means, what I'm trying to say, that even though we celebrate that we are having strategic partnership agreement, my point is that we need to be careful because all the strategic partnership are as strong as both the country they are trying to make it. So sometimes some strategic partnerships are very weak, some strategic partnerships are very strong. So that I would like to draw your attention to. So strategic partnership, again, many people say that India and South Korea, the strategic partnership has very limited content. Maybe except few, like say on North Korea and Pakistan connections, if we have intelligence, we can share with each other. I think many like other issues, important issues, like especially those issues which are critical to Indian security, South Korea is reluctant to take stand. Similarly, India is also not ready to say anything about, say, Tokto Island. Like we can't see anything. So I feel that strategic partnership is still, we need to further enhance our strategic partnership. If we look at scope of CEPA, I told you that in first 2 years there was some growth, but probably many scholars, they say, CEPA became the reason for less economic exchanges between India and Korea. The reason was that it was very limited, very, you can say, there were lots of items which are not included in CEPA. And that's why in 2015, when Narendra Modi visited Korea, we decided to revise our CEPA, but unfortunately, it hasn't been revised till now. Here, I would like to say that, when President Nomuyan visited India in 2004, then I think a joint study group was established. And in 5 years, CEPA was concluded. Now, 2015, they wanted to revise the CEPA, and this is 2023. It means in 8 years, the revision has not been done. So you can understand there must be some problem areas where I think both the countries, they are having different opinion. And the obvious points could be one, India is worried about trade deficit. India is looking for more opening in South Korean service sector, whereas South Korea is looking for more opening in India's manufacturing sector. Similarly, if I have to identify a few more things, I think India and South Korea, they are looking for like how human resources could also be exchanged. So there is some disagreement on those issues as well. So my point is that even though we are having a very good journey, there are areas where we can improve our relationship, and I think that's the purpose of this. I think there are few other things. I think old stories. I think probably Dr. Che will tell you about that. About so many other areas where we can work. So she will say some more things. Now, coming to Indo-Pacific part. Indo-Pacific strategy, there is no one Indo-Pacific strategy. There are multiple Indo-Pacific strategies. All the countries, they are having their own Indo-Pacific strategy. So they appear similar, but there are slight differences in them. For example, India was part of Quad, quadrilateral network of countries. But India was reluctant to use Indo-Pacific strategy word for a very long time. In 2018, in Shangri-La Dialogue, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he made a speech, and in that, India's Indo-Pacific strategy was stated. The most important part, like most of the, like say Japan, Australia, and United States, they talk about free, open Indo-Pacific. But India added inclusive in it. So free, open, inclusive. And in his speech, Narendra Modi used this word inclusive maybe I think 5 or 6 times. So many, I think some journalists, they asked Indian officers after his speech that does it mean that you are going to include China also? And he said, yes, if China plays by rule, China could also be. So I think that's an informal discussion, but it's basically inclusive. Inclusive means other countries, especially Southeast Asian countries, East Asian countries, they could also play a very important role. India had been also in our Indo-Pacific strategy very careful not to look as if we are targeting China. So we have been very careful on that. And I think we are also having, as I told you, Act East policy. Act East policy is again having the similar geographical scope. Indo-Pacific, actually in Act East policy, we use Asia-Pacific word. But I think the geographical spread of Act East policy is also similar to Indo-Pacific. So we are having double. I think in case it's required, I will discuss about that. What is the difference Indo-Pacific strategy and Act East policy? But I think, and as I told you that since India is part of Indo-Pacific strategy, and we are part of Quad, but at the same time, we are careful about China. Because of that, basically, this policy could be possible only when we emphasize that we want strategic autonomy. So this strategic autonomy word has been very, very important for Indian foreign policy. And I think that's basically must be, I think Dr. Che will make some other, you can say, important, I think from South Korean side, how, from Indian side, I will say that, look, when we make our Indo-Pacific strategy, one, we want to be with big players for important country, we want to make it inclusive. We want to be careful about China. And in that plan, South Korea is a very, very important partner. South Korea is a middle power. India considers that South Korea is a very important ally. And economic, technological, cultural power of South Korea is known across the globe. I think South Korea is called in everywhere, I think, soft power. Soft power, and actually a new term which has been used by some Indian scholars saying transformative power. Transformative power means South Korea in a very short span of time, it was a poor country and it was an aid receiving country. But within 30-40 years, Korea became aid donor country. Probably the only example in the world, an aid receiving country becoming aid donor country. So this is how Korea transformed itself. And Korea is trying to, you can say, inform other countries, including India. Actually, Korea, in last, I think, 7-8 years, there have been many important, like there is a caravan. There are a program where actually Korean scholars, Korean businessmen, they go to different parts of India every year, and they have 2-3 days conference, and they talk about new village movement, Semaulundong. They talk about economic success of South Korea. They, you can say, other cultural richness of Korea. And that way they basically teach those countries, including India, how they can also transform themselves. So I think it's a very, very important partner and from Indian side. And both of us, South Korea, we are like South Korea is military ally of United States. India is also very nowadays quite close to America. So I think here also South Korea and India, we are quite close to each other. And when we look at our economic connection with China, or say in general connection with China, for South Korea, China is an important player because external trade, I think more than 25% trade of South Korea, it happens only with China. I think 2023, the figure has gone down to less than 20%. But I think there are other regions, Corona and other problems, so maybe I think it can rebound. Similarly, India is also having largest trading partner in China. So I think China is economically important for us. At the same time, strategically also, India and South Korea, we are adjoining country to China. And especially dealing with North Korea, South Korea needs some kind of, can say, assistance from China. India also, we are having a long border with China, more than 4,000 kilometers, and we can't just whisk them out. So I think that's also very interesting that we are concerned about China rise, but at the same time, we don't want to look as if we are anti-China. We want to create disincentive for China to become assertive, to break the rules of the game. So rather than confronting as maybe Australia could do, which is far away from China, or say United States they can do, I think we are middle powers and we have similar approach towards China, which is much more nuanced and careful than other countries. And I think South Korea earlier, I think it has some friction with Japan. Now things are improving. So India looks positively to this because I think India and Japan relations have been also quite satisfactory for a very long time. So if South Korea-Japan relations improves, I think it would be easier for India to cooperate with both the countries simultaneously. Actually, in 2009-11 sometimes, we had a trilateral 1.5 dialogue. So 2-3 years it happened, Japan, South Korea, and India. And we may restart this kind of India, Japan, and South Korea. And this dialogue would mean for India, maybe for South Asia, maybe for Southeast Asia, all these issues could be taken and we can have a common approach for this region. So I think we feel that we have commonality of interest and we are basically long-term partners. I think most of the things I have told you, but one more interesting thing which comes from this slide, that our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, after G7 meeting in Hiroshima, he went to Pacific Island countries. He went to South Pacific, and he had meeting with 14 states of Pacific Island countries. And within 15 days, I think President Yoon Suk-yeol also had meeting with all the Pacific Island countries. So you can see how our approach has been also converging. I think India and South Korea, both we are saying that global South and global North divide must be breached. We need to communicate, we need to connect global South with global North. And I think in January this year, India had a meeting of Global South because September we are going to have G20 meeting. And India wanted to tell expectations of those global South countries to G20 countries. I think South Korea is also quite interested in doing that. Bilateral also, I think you know that this is the 50th anniversary of our diplomatic relationship, 2023. We started in 1973, and September, I think our like say South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is going to visit India. I think the thing which I wanted to say that when we are looking at our bilateral relations, especially economic relationship, we try to avoid making it so-called transactional. Transactional means how much India is giving to India and how much Korea is receiving from India. That kind of short-term mechanical reciprocity is really problematic for long-term relationship. We said, like from Indian side, I will say that India should not look at trade deficit alone. If South Korea and India bilateral trade is growing up, there are many good practices which Indian company they are learning. So trade deficit is one part. We should look at the bigger picture, and I think we should maintain our good relationship. I think I would in the last, I think I will say that India and South Korea, we are in a very important phase of relationship. Earlier also we had a big 30 years. In Indo-Pacific strategy phase also, there are lots of opportunities. And we need to, I would say 2 important things are important right now. One is that awareness about each other. I think still in India, they have lots of people, they don't know much about Korea. Actually, I can tell you that when I speak in India, I talk to many people and I say that, what do you feel? India is having more trade with Japan or India is having more trade with Korea? And 99% people who are not aware about figure, I'm talking about just perception, they feel that India is having more trade with Japan. But this is not correct. For last more than 10 years, India-South Korean bilateral trade has been more than India-Japan bilateral trade. But somehow, Japan is having much more bigger awareness in Indian mind and perception than Korea. So I think that must be corrected. And that could be done through people-to-people contact, cultural connects, and other, you can say, academic and other exchanges between people of India and Korea. So I think that's awareness must be. So that's one important factor, I would say. And the second is trust. I think, as I told you, that you don't have to have a sales diplomacy. You don't have to, like Trump used to say, transactional relationship. You don't have to think about that. You have to look at long-term reciprocity, organic relationship, historical, cultural connects between India and South Korea. And we have almost similar value. You know, South Korea people say that Korea has been a country in the 5,000 history, we never attacked any other country. Actually, India also claims that in 5,000 history, we never attacked any other country. I'm not sure how much is true. I think in the sense historians may contradict. But I'm saying that this is the value of peace-loving and you can say middle path, not going to extremes. So I think this is the nature of India and Korean society and Indian and Korean, you can say, states. So I think in long-term basis, we are good partners and we need to have good, relationship, both for our bilateral relationship and also this good relationship is having lots of benefits for regional Indo-Pacific scape also. So I'll stop myself here and I'll come into questions answer session. Thank you.
네, 산티 교수님 한인도 관계에 대해서 발표 이렇게 잘 해주셔서 감사합니다. 제가 몇 가지만 좀 강조해드리고 싶은 포인트를 조금 보충을 해드리고 그 다음에 사실은 이제 플로우를 오픈해서 Q&A 시간을 통해서 좀 더 이제 궁금증을 풀어가는 그런 방식으로 진행을 하는 것이 좋을 것 같은데요. 일단 지금 이제 몇 가지 요 발표 자료를 보면서 이제 추가적으로 말씀을 드리면 예를 들면 지금 한인도 교역을 말씀하셨는데. 최근에 재미있는 현상은 뭐냐면 그 미국이 인도태평양 전략을 본격적으로 시작하면서 지금 전 세계의 그 교역 구도가 상당히 많이 바뀌고 있고요. 특히 우리나라 입장에서는 올해 들어 처음으로 우리의 제1위 교육 대상국이 중국에서 미국으로 바뀝니다. 그리고 그게 지금 여기 트레이드 요 테이블에 보시면은 2021년, 2022년 코로나가 아직 채 끝나지 않은 기간에 인도와 한국의 교역이 엄청나게 지금 폭증을 하고 있는 걸 볼 수가 있는데요. 2023년 올해 1사분기 경우에 보면요. 자동차 같은 경우에 우리나라의 대인도 자동차 수출은 10배가 넘게 증가를 합니다. 굉장히 놀라운 수치인데요. 그러니까 지금 우리나라 교역에서 중국이 차지하고 있는 비중은 줄어들고 있고 이게 좋다는 건 아니지만 그래도 상대적으로 좀 보완적으로 이 비중을 대체하고 있는 것이 미국, 인도, 아세안입니다. 그래서 이제 우리나라 입장에서 인도태평양 전략을 통해서 우리의 경제 성장의 엔진을 좀 더 보강하는 것이 굉장히 중요하다는 것을 하나 강조를 해드리고 싶었고요. 인도의 인도태평양 전략을 우리 선대 교수님 간단히 말씀을 해주셨는데 여기에서 우리가 한국도 인도태평양 전략을 갖고 있고 인도도 인도태평양 전략을 갖고 있다고 그래서 우리가 굉장히 비슷한 전략적 어떤 포지션을 갖고 있다라고만 말하기에는 조금 위험한 부분, 좀 조심할 부분이 있어서 제가 그 부분을 좀 다시 한번 강조를 해드리고자 합니다. 아시다시피 전 세계적으로 인도태평양 전략을 발표한 국가는 14개 정도 국가가 되고요. 사실은 14개의 전략들이 모두 다 제각각의 뉘앙스를 갖고 있습니다. 강조점도 다르고요. 인도에 같은 경우에는 우리 선대 교수님 말씀해 주신 것처럼 전략적 자율성을 가장 중요하게 생각을 합니다. 그래서 이제 인도태평양이라는 단어를 쓰기 굉장히 꺼려했다고 그랬는데 인도 나름대로의 인도태평양 전략이라고 할 수 있는 것은 모디 정부 출범한 직후에 사실은 이제 인도가 전통적으로 육군, 내륙으로부터의 어떤 군사적 압력, 안보 위협에 굉장히 민감한 나라였는데 제일 먼저 발표한 안보 전략은 Ensuring Secure Seas, 그래서 해양 안보 전략입니다. 그리고 이제 Act East Policy 2014년 같은 해에 이제 발표하고 2015년에 사가르라고 해서 이 지역 모두의 성장과 안보를 위한 전략 이런 것들을 이제 차곡차곡 발표를 하면서 인도는 지금 뭐라고 그러냐면 인도의 인도태평양 전략은 모디 정부 출범과 함께 인도가 발표한 고유한 전략에서 그 근원을 갖고 있다. 그러니까 즉 인도태평양 전략이 미국의 어떤 그런 얼라인한 거나 그것에서 변용을 한 것이 아니고 인도가 갖고 있는 전통적인 지역 전략을 연장선상에서 발전시킨 것이다. 라고 이제 전략적 중요성을 강조를 하고 있습니다. 그리고 실제로 인도가 이제 인도의 인도태평양 전략이라고 말하는 인도-Pacific Oceans Initiative도 인도태평양이라는 단어를 직접적으로 쓰지는 않았습니다. 그래서 인도는 그런 식으로 전략적 자율성을 강조하고 있다는 게 이제 두 번째 보충 포인트고요. 세 번째는 그러면 인도가 이렇게 전략적 자율성을 막 강조하고 있고요. 지금 이제 최근에 6월 21일부터 4박 5일간 모디 총리가 미국을 국빈 방문했습니다. 미국이 정상의 국빈 방문을 맞은 것은 프랑스, 한국에 이어서 인도가 세 번째였는데요. 미국 언론의 평가를 보면 미국의 역대 국빈 방문 행사 중에 가장 성대한 행사를 치렀다고 합니다. 그게 이제 인도가 갖고 있는 어떤 전략적 중요성 때문이기도 하겠고요. 인도가 갖고 있는 인도태평양 전략의 그런 어떤 다양한 스펙트럼을 미국 쪽으로 조금 더 끌어당기려는 어떤 그런 노력이 있었겠는데 그래서 현재 지금 미국과 인도의 관계는요. 아까 그 SP가 지금 30개 플러스 2개 정도 된다고 이야기했는데 요번에 그 Comprehensive Global Strategic Partnership을 갖게 됩니다. 그러니까 가장 최상위 단계의 파트너십을 미국과 인도는 갖고 있는 것이고요. 그 아래서 사실은 생각할 수 있는 모든 분야에서의 파트너십 그 협정을 새로 만들거나 아니면 리뉴얼 하게 됩니다. 거기에는 정말 놀랍게도 반도체 투자도 있고요. 그다음에 그동안 사실은 이제 인도가 러시아에서 우리의 사드에 해당하는 S-40, 400 그 미사일 시스템, 방공 시스템이라든지 이런 것들을 도입했고 러시아산 무기가 현재는 54%로 그 수입하는 비중이 두렵습니다만 지금 현재 봤을 때는 러시아산 무기가 한 60% 정도를 점유하고 있거든요. 근데 그거를 이제 프랑스산과 미국산이 대체를 하고 있지만 그런 상황에도 불구하고 인도에서 전투기를 생산하고 그 기술을 양도한다든지 그 제너럴 일렉트릭이 투자를 하고 마이크론이라는 반도체 회사가 8억 불 넘는 투자를 하고 이런 식의 어떤 첨단 산업을 위한 투자, 협력 협정 그다음에 그런 것들을 이제 쭉 맺게 됩니다. 그래서 인도가 갖고 있는 이런 그 전략적 가치가 최근에 그 미국 방미에서 좀 어느 절정을 이루지 않았나. 근데 그럼에도 불구하고 이제 내부에서는 사실은 굉장히 회의적인 시각, 비판적인 시각도 있습니다. 인도가 그런다고 미국의 편이 될 것으로 생각하느냐. 그래서 이제 인도의 입장에 대해서는 우리 산디 교수님하고 이제 앞으로 우리 토론에서 좀 더 많이 이야기를 할 수 있을 것 같은데요. 그래서 이제 인도는 담선적으로 보기에는 굉장히 어려운 다양한 스펙트럼의 전략적 모습을 갖고 있다는 점을 아마 잊지 말아야 될 것으로 보입니다. 그리고 사실은 인도태평양 전략이 생기면서 근데 인도와 우리의 접점이 많이 생긴 것은 확실하고요. 아까 이제 남태평양 이야기 하셨는데 우리도 인도태평양 전략 발표한 다음에 지난 5월 29, 30 이틀간 이제 최초의 남태평양 도서국 정상들과의 정상회담을 개최를 합니다. 그리고 글로벌 사우스와 협력을 확대하겠다고 이야기를 하고 있고 인도태평양 전략에서 기여 외교, contributive diplomacy라는 것을 통해서 이제 전략적 지평을 확대하려는 노력을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이런 그 인도의 인도태평양 전략과 한국의 인태 전략은 접점도 갖고 있고 차이점도 갖고 있습니다. 근데 앞으로 어떤 식으로 최상의 시너지를 낼지 그거는 이제 함께 풀어가야 될 과제인 것 같고요. 제가 뭐 추가적인 말씀 여기까지 드리기로 하고 나머지는 플로어를 오픈해서 자유로운 코멘트랑 질의응답을 받는 것이 어떨까 생각합니다. 네.